The impudence, the audacity, the unmitigated gall of those knuckleheads of liberty podcasters, daring to voice opinions outside the mainstream of accepted thought. Listen if you dare. It's angry, it's funny, it's even sometimes sad, but it's always based on freedom and justice, as you will see. Here's our host, Jason McPhee.
Welcome to the Knuckleheads of Liberty. We're coming at you on September 28th, 2022. Always just amazing how far we seem to be slipping in this current administration. But we're going to talk a little bit with a focus on the kids today. And we have a special guest as well, John Papala of Dad Saves America. And let's see. Okay, we got the visuals back up. And and we're going to be, I guess before we get into it, let me introduce you to our panel. So on our right side here, we have John. So he's there. And I think Leon is probably somewhere behind the scenes. Hopefully he'll be able to pop. There he is. Okay. So, and our, Leon, you're muted. So you might want to unmute. So, yeah, and so we
Knuckleheads
have
indeed.
Exactly.
Knuckleheads indeed. That's right.
In our upper left-hand corner, we have Leon, the word Brathwaite, last word in Liberty, and aspiring producer on the show. But anyways, so that's worthy of a performance that might get you hired in the Biden administration.
You never know. You never know, man. You never know. It might just happen.
There's no height you can't fail to in government.
Yes, exactly. Well, anyways, so we're going to talk about all the ways we seem to be failing our kids nowadays, and that's why it's great to have John here with us as well, since he has a podcast, Dad Saves America. In fact, maybe Leon, you could pull that up real quick just so we can show people the website real quick. So Dad Saves America, yep. And yeah, we can mention that again at the end of the show. But I tell you, with all of the crazy stuff that we've gone through recently, the craziest seems to be the way we have literally put the burden of the kids, burden on the kids of COVID. You talk about a population that had very little risk of this disease. To themselves, essentially the flu actually was more dangerous for them than COVID was, and yet they are the ones who are taking the hit on almost everything. Their social skills, they've been forced to mask up, they've been forced to miss school, they are taking on a lot of the debts that are coming out of all this. But specifically with school, I mean, we're just finding out now that kids apparently their reading and math scores have fallen sharply since before the pandemic.
Shocking.
Of course,
shocking.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, shocking to no one.
Exactly. I mean, who could have predicted? I mean, here the Human Rights Watch was, and this was back in April of 2020, right when this was happening, and they were saying, "Hey, look, this is going to have a devastating impact on kids," and yet. We just, we dove headlong into this. You guys want to talk about this a little bit?
Well, I think the first thing is, that headline that you just had up, COVID-19's devastating impact. It's like, no, it wasn't COVID-19's devastating impact. Right. It was the devastating impact of absolutely avoidable and completely unnecessary government policies.
Yes.
That's what did it. Yes. Because you don't see these impacts in Sweden, where they were sane. And they said, you know what? We're going to focus only on people who have immune compromised situations, whether it's
the high risk people,
existing conditions. They right from the beginning, for whatever reason, whatever political economy, cultural dynamic, the Scandinavian countries have very high levels of sort of social trust. That's largely a function of history and the fact that they're kind of these like tiny little homogenous city states that bear no resemblance to the multicultural, pluralistic, massive society of America, despite what Bernie Sanders wants to believe. But they were able to say, oh, yeah, we're all adults, and it looks like this virus is mostly truly uniquely dangerous to the elderly. And so that's where we're going to focus our energy. And everyone else, be an adult. You're an adult. It's do what you got to do. And we now know that was the right call. And what the American government did, especially at the state level with schools, was the wrong call.
Yes.
And our kids pay the price. I mean, in some ways you could say from a libertarian perspective, it was one of the benefits of COVID that they got kicked out of school. And it was certainly was the benefit as far as like parental awareness of what a disaster
It was, yes.
are.
You know,
That's
and
the
you say
silver
you say, John, that the kids pay the price, but the kids are paying the price even now. You know, I mean, you know, you can argue, you could even say, well, you know, maybe the first 2 weeks that they had to shut down because we didn't understand everything about the virus or its severity. We didn't fully understand. Maybe you could say that. But by the time 2 weeks, a month went into this thing in 2020, we knew that kids were the least vulnerable. We knew that. Okay,
we certainly knew it by
yes.
the fall of 2020.
So
right?
exactly
When school started that year.
Yes. So
Yeah.
we knew this by the time to reopen school in the fall of 2020. And we knew that it was the elderly and we knew it was the immune compromised people. We knew that. But still, those teachers' unions and the government officials and the Democrats and all of them, they had to keep those schools closed, keep us locked down, destroying our children and destroying their future. Now look at the results. Who's surprised? Nobody would be. Nobody should be.
I have a new project coming up that you both, I think, are going to really like. It's working together with our friends at the Independent Institute out of Oakland. It's the third season of our web series Love Gov. And in this season, Gov, the character, is an actor who plays the physical embodiment of big government. He's the superintendent of public schools. And so our protagonist, who's a mom and a parent, ensures her son, oh no, it's going to be back to normal. We're going to be back in class. And on day one, it's announced that moving forward, all class will take place in the metaverse. And so the 5 episodes, which will come out next month, basically just harpoon skewer what's being done to our kids in public school. It's basically like our list of conversation topics that we were talking about before this. They're all in there. The wokeism, the wacky identity politics, the completely irrational, fear-based approach to talking about subjects. It's all there, and it's all. Unfortunately, unfortunately that's what we've got. Is we've got to make fun of this because the reality is so gross.
Yes.
Yeah.
Indeed.
By the way, too, for our viewers, our Screaming Eagle has just unexpectedly joined us today, so he's dropped in on the conversation. But John, real quick, you mentioned this new 5 episodes that you're going to put out. Where is that going to be available at again? Or
that'll be available on YouTube. We'll link to it on our Emergent Order YouTube channel. It'll also be available on the Independent Institute's YouTube channel.
Okay, great. We'll definitely look for that. But you know, you're talking about some of these crazy things our schools are doing to us, and I tell you, it's almost like the schools are perverting our kids. And Leah, maybe you want to pull up the visual real quick here. I mean, some of the stuff is so bizarre. I would have thought it was just parody if somebody had said this 10, 15 years ago, that this would be the stuff we'd be talking about in our public schools. Apparently in New Jersey, they're telling some teachers that they have to teach about anal sex. Mm-hmm. And I just can't even imagine, let alone, talking about sex is kind of a dicey issue, but then to be talking about just all kinds of different varieties and everything else of this, it just is beyond the pale. But more and just more craziness. Like in Canada, there was this school teacher that apparently decided to dress up, I guess, is the way to go, because this is not, I don't think this is an operation or anything. but this school teacher decided that this is how they wanted to teach their school in this kind of garb.
And it's a man, by the way.
Yes, that is a man. Yes, yeah, sorry, I was missing
prosthetic breasts.
Yeah, and I mean, here's a picture of the person in teaching shop, which is just beyond the pale. And it's funny too. My daughter pointed out the other day as well that, hey, that person doesn't have their hair tied up and they're working on machinery. So not only is the person doing something,
even the basic safety protocols are being
exactly. So they're incompetent at their job too, apparently.
Right there on the signs, you have to tuck your silicone nipples in before using the chop saw.
Exactly.
Everybody learns that in home ec and shop class.
Well, but then so we have all these impacts that are they're essentially teaching all of these crazy things, and then suddenly we have all this news too that kids are reporting that they're, I guess, twice as high reports of being transgender too now. So which is kind of strange. I mean, it's certainly at the very least it's a very strange coincidence that all these other things are happening in school while now suddenly all the kids are reporting that they're transgender, or at least a large amount of them. So anyways, I'll kick it out to you guys now at this point.
But look at the lunacy. Look at the lunacy that is ongoing here. Okay, and going back to our first story, we know the kids are falling behind in reading, writing, and math. We know that. Okay, especially kids in our urban centers, the inner cities of America, they are falling behind. But what are the schools focusing on? Social justice, transgenderism, and all this other garbage. And if you think about it for a second, while all of a sudden we hear now that twice as many kids are actually transgender, think about that for a second. All of a sudden, out of the blues? No, it's those teachers in those schools, like that's one I just showed from Canada, who are corrupting the mind of little kids. Okay? Because, I mean, when you have a 5-year-old or 6-year-old or 7-year-old, you could convince that kid of anything. So you could get a boy could be a girl could be a boy, and all this other nonsense. They're not teaching the fundamentals. They're not doing that. They are damaging our children, but they want to teach us of all these woke stuff, social justice, transgenderism, and all this other stuff, which will get our children nowhere. Nowhere.
I think that one of the things that's so strange is that it shouldn't be controversial that our kids shouldn't be sexualized as third graders and below. Like, that's not actually controversial with most normal people. You know, that's basically what that Florida bill essentially said is below third grade, no discussion of sexual topics because they're third graders down below, you know, and it was called the anti-gay bill or the don't say gay bill.
Don't say gay. Don't say gay.
You know, whatever sort of, you know, 501c4 market tested slogan was constructed, you know, on a tight turnaround six figure contract to develop. You know, it's always this nice pithy 3-word roll off the tongue thing. I worked in marketing for 20 years. You know, you can always tell when it's like a perfectly focused, tested, coordinated influencer planted thing that is suddenly out there and everyone's saying the exact same phrase in the exact same way with the exact same talking points. There is a small percentage of Americans, of human beings who suffer from a kind of a permanent gender dysphoria.
Yes.
And an even smaller percentage who are intersex. Those people exist.
Yes.
They are not the basis for policy for all kids. Nobody reasonable would decide, oh, for example, here in Austin ISD now, when you log into their interfaces, it shows the kids' preferred pronouns in the interface, as if we need to let our kids know from an early age that, well, this is a choice you can make about whether you should be called a boy or a girl. and you have to affirmatively make the choice as part of setting up your profile in school.
Right.
I think this stuff it's troubling as a parent, and it's an attempt to rip even more away from us as parents the things that only belong with us. It's only our prerogative to have these conversations with our kids. It is not the government's job,
right,
to talk to our kids about their sexuality. It's not.
Yes.
There's no power granted to any level of government to talk to our kids about their sexuality, and to assert that, and to turn the public square into a battleground over sexual identity is, it's not like conservatives and libertarians who are trying to turn the public square into a gender battleground. We're not the ones trying to make an issue of this.
Right.
We're just saying, actually, let's not make an issue of it. Let's leave it to the family to discuss. And some families are going to be, having gender reveal parties for their baby at 6 months when it decides it's a boy, whatever the hell that means. But, most people are going to be like, well, I know it's a boy because it has a penis.
Yes, yeah. That's what the rest of us do. Exactly.
You might be bursting
I
some
don't know.
people's
I
bubble
believe
there,
in
John.
science, including biology. So, but hey, you can believe whatever you want. It might technically be a kind of child abuse, but that's not really ultimately for me to decide.
Well,
But
Screaming Eagle did
you raise the issue of gender dysphoria, and I don't want to trivialize that it is a mental disorder. Okay, it is a psychological disorder, and I don't want to trivialize it because people do struggle with this thing, and I'm very sympathetic to these people who are struggling with gender dysphoria. But you're absolutely right when you say just because we have a very small fraction of our fellow Americans struggling with this disorder, that means the rest of us have to live in some alternate reality about with pronouns, and our kids have to be taught this garbage in school and all that kind of stuff and things like that. No, of course not.
Well, thank God we're not in Canada, right? Because we could be fined and actually
Yes.
put in jail for having any kind of conversation about this. It's I know Jimmy Dore's podcast covered this topic with the mentally disturbed teacher who comes to school in a completely outrageous, like, porn star prosthetics for the kids.
Yeah.
It's like, how is that? And the school came to their defense, but then said, well, we have to by law. It's like, well, then you're not a safe place for kids, and I can't send my kids to the school. That's the answer to that. It's like, okay, well, you've raised your hand and said, don't send your kids to the school. And in America, we have more ability to do that for now.
Well, did our Screaming Eagle want to jump in on this, Tim? Since you,
I'm still trying to figure out how they're going to discuss anal sex along with avoiding pronouns and talks about penises. I suppose they can add strap-on dildos to the mix and really be able to spread the pronoun requirement to the four corners of the universe. So why are we even talking about this stuff? It's beyond me. So I'm just glad I don't have kids that are young anymore, thankfully. So old age has its perks.
And that's a good point. That's a good point. Why I mean, the more important point is why the schools feel that they have to talk about this. Why the schools feel that they have to teach these things to our kids.
It's not like anal sex is so common and popular and that every couple engages in that on a regular basis. Just such a major part of the sexual activity of the average American that they have to even discuss it as low down as people in elementary school.
But even if it was a regular part of our sexual
even
activity,
if it was,
why do they have to discuss it in school?
Do they imagine the government is going to teach us how to do it better if that's what we're so inclined to do?
Well, I think we all know the answer to that, and it is almost certainly yes.
It is certainly yes. But,
the government's
from their point of view, it would be yes. From our point of view, it would be You know, I'm 70 years old and I still don't know how to do that. So therefore,
we got to jump in on some of these
enough,
classes, Tim.
yeah, apparently,
You gotta learn, man.
Yeah.
You gotta learn. Come on now. Come on now.
I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say never because you know you don't know what you haven't had, so you don't know what you're missing. But anyway, there you are.
Well, I think you're missing the real story here, which is that this was in New Jersey. And as someone who's spent most of in a way, I consider myself to be at least partly from New Jersey. And they were just trying to explain to kids what vafangul means.
Okay.
Which is an
that-
Italian
I need
slur.
to
It's
be-
basically
I
a
need
way
to
of
hear
saying
that
go F
explanation.
yourself. But if you actually translate it, va fa culo, go do a butt.
Okay.
So, you know, it's just a little colloquial flavor thing
Yeah.
that they're adding to the New Jersey curriculum. That's all.
Oh. Well,
It's all part of
now
our
I'm
new.
enlightened.
It's an Italian American thing.
Yeah.
It's all part of our new diversity criteria. Well, but you know, it's funny because as we spend so much time with this, and by the way, this is an excellent rationale for school choice because, oh my gosh, you know, I mean, if we're going to get it
Yeah.
wrong, let's get it wrong on a small scale and not on, you know, with everybody.
Right.
but it's funny because as we do this, we are just teaching our kids into debt. I mean, we're spending more and more money on you know, per pupil to teach kids all kinds of nonsense, and then we're telling kids that you know, hey, I guess high school isn't enough anymore. And Leon, maybe we could pull up the visual here, but high school isn't enough anymore, so you're going to need to go to college for a little bit more government education. and oh, by the way, you should go into debt for that as well, personal debt, as if your parents haven't already gone into enough debt for it. and now here we are, just farther into crazy debt. By the way, Tim, I think maybe we're getting an echo on your end or somebody's side. So maybe you could mute your side or something.
Okay.
But yeah, but let's see. The echo gone away?
No, I'm still hearing it.
Uh-oh.
That might be me. Let me.
Okay. Maybe we could. Or maybe there's a mute or something just until you start talking or something. But anyway,
Notice how I get blamed for everything.
What? You were the last in. Anyways, you know, but the point is, I mean, my gosh, we're you know, spending more on education. We're getting kids into deeper debt, and then they wind up with degrees that can't even pay that debt off.
Exactly.
So, what do you guys think about this? I mean, just absolute nuts insanity with all this education stuff that's going on.
Well, you know, it's the corruption. The corruption is still ongoing. I mean, with Biden and company, look at this thing, this loan forgiveness stuff that they just did. They say that, oh, they're gonna forgive these loans and they're gonna free these students to go pursue their dreams and all that kind of stuff and things like that. But who the hell is gonna pay for this? Okay.
Well, nobody. Didn't you know that? No, it's not. It can just be forgiven, and it just means it doesn't have to get paid back, and there's no implications for that at all. I've had people on my Facebook page who seem like they are adults make this exact point. There is no cost to forgiving the debt. It is simply the money was already spent, and that's that. And it's like, well, you don't understand the way the most basic balance sheet works then. Like the government treats these loans as assets on its balance sheet. So when it forgives them, it has to realize the loss, which means it has to raise funds. You know, it's just like the so-called Social Security Trust Fund. That doesn't exist.
Yes.
There is no trust fund. In the trust fund are treasury bills. Treasury bills are government debt.
Yes, exactly.
So in order for the Social Security system to spend the money in the trust fund, it needs to be turned into cash. Well, that means you have to get cash. They're not going to send you a T-bill, so they have to borrow more money.
Yeah.
It's just like the level of basic financial literacy in this country is part of the reason why politicians can induce these kinds of Ponzi scheme scams on the rest of us. I mean, Social Security itself was admitted it is a Ponzi scheme. Definitionally,
we could have a whole show on all the trust funds and how good they are or bad they are in the general scheme of transferring money from young Americans to older Americans.
Right.
But without going into that, I think all I would have to say about this whole teaching students to be debt slaves, there is the same thing the federal government and probably state governments do. They teach adults how to be debt slaves. It's all about consuming, that when they worry about the economy, it's not about production or entrepreneurship. It's about consumption. The almighty great God consumption. Everyone has to consume. And to do that with reckless abandon requires that you go into debt, and which is what the government teaches us. You follow your parents, and if the federal government's our parent, then the parents doing a good job of teaching us how to go into debt. And I think that it's part and parcel to the general outlook that governments on the decline have. And our government, in my opinion, and my cynical opinion, is on the decline. And so this is all part of that decline.
Tim, you mentioned something interesting there too when you talk about consumerism. I recall one of the most appalling things I heard in the past roughly 20 years was when we were going to war with Iraq, and George Bush came out and said, the way you can help the effort is to go out and spend money. We don't just hit the lefties on this show. Somebody on the right says something insane, we'll hit them.
George Bush said we have to intervene in the markets to save capitalism, right? He did say that.
Right.
Oh, he passed the first stimulus in early 2008. I mean, he was no free market guy in the true classical liberal sense. He was just a big government. He was just big government man.
Yeah. Well, sorry. Go ahead, Tim.
Is it so? It's just part of the game plan. When I say we're in decline, I'm counting it from probably the early 20th century, because prior to that we were still kind of on the rise after going through the industrial age and all the increases of benefits to our standard of living that came therefrom. And so at this point in time, what else are you going to expect the federal government to do but to teach kids how to be debt slaves and all that?
Jumping right in on that's a good segue to our next thing, and maybe we could bring up the visual, Leon, as far as what we're doing to our kids in terms of debt. So it's not just student loan debt. I mean, we are giving them a mountain of debt, and this is from the CBO, the Congressional Budget Office, and this shows debt to GDP. And, they recently truncated this, I guess, because maybe it makes their case for government managing things look a little better. But here's a visual of the one before they had truncated it. This is this is from Fee out there, and so you can see essentially from the beginning of the beginning of the 20th century here, 1900. Essentially, debt to GDP was minor, and it was only these big efforts like wars that really raised things. Okay, so World War II was the biggest, thing we'd seen at all, in the past. I mean, it was around 100% of debt to GDP in order to save the world from tyranny, I guess you'd say. And we sort of produced our way out of it. But, now with the pandemic, I mean, and the government response is really what we're talking about, lockdowns and paying people not to work. This is, where we've gotten to with government managing things. And what do we have to show for it? And this is literally what our government is projecting going out into the future. It is absolutely nasty.
Yeah.
Sure.
I'm sorry. Jason, can you, your mouse hovered over that and it showed a plus sign. Can you bump that up?
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Look at 1913 when the Federal Reserve came into existence. So 1910 goes along, and then 3 years later, boom, Federal Reserve. Oh, wow, we have carte blanche. We can just print what we want. Here we go. Do we want to get into a world war? Yeah, let's do that. Did they know about that potentiality when they created the Federal Reserve? I don't know. You tell me.
Yeah. Well, and before we can jump back to this, but where this really makes the point is that how much every person owes. That includes our kids. I mean, if you were to divide this evenly, okay, we're talking without those things like Social Security. This is literally, we're talking about over $100,000 per person is what we owe at this point. This is that we're actually right about in here, and I think this graph may be this is from 2019, I think, or something. So this is slightly old, but the point is that this is showing the actual amounts that if you were to distribute this per person per capita out here, this is what we're all owing, and this is where we're headed. And it's just fantasy land. I mean, the idea that we all owe this much money to pay for the debt that our government owes. So, and that's what we're doing to our kids. I mean, this is literally what putting this all on the backs of them.
The reality is that that's not going to happen. What's going to happen is they will eventually cut back on Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security, which is the dominant drivers of future cost of government.
Yes.
These people like to talk about investments. It's the most disgusting, verbal appropriation of words, because it's we have to make investments in our future, and that's why we're going to pass this infrastructure bill. And you know what infrastructure is? It's actually equity and just giving money to randos. That's what that's an investment. So this Keynesian spending produces, consumption creates, like world flip. You could get away with it when you had 5 workers to every 1 retiree.
Right.
You can't get away with the Ponzi scheme when the bottom of the period is narrower than the top. So that's what's happening. So we're telling our kids, don't have any more kids because of climate change and because the world's going to come to an end, even though nothing that you read that's legitimate says that, including the IPCC reports. Like the IPCC report, the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, it says that the world's going to be 4 times richer in 2100. That's their projection. So I don't see how being richer tomorrow warrants the word crisis. How is that?
Exactly.
Exactly.
Yes.
But this is one of the primary drivers of psychological problems in terms of the fear industrial complex, which is what I call these people, with our kids. They are being bombarded from an early age that the planet is in danger, which is not true. It's just not true. It's not in the data. It is a religion that has been going on since the early 60s, failing its way into the cultural conversation. Paul Ehrlich's population bomb, he thought that the UK would literally cease to exist by 1990.
Yeah.
Because of population collapse and famine and all this. None of this stuff is true. Right. So our kids aren't having kids themselves. Our birth rate is now below replacement. Europe's in worse shape than we are on this front. And yet we're borrowing from the future to pad the present. But in the future, there's going to be fewer people actually working and earning than the present.
Right.
I mean,
so John, you think that
where do we go from there?
Yeah. So, John, do you think that the government then, in response to this problem, are going to become austere and start cutting back benefits to Social Security and Medicare recipients? You think that's the most likely outcome?
Well, I think we're already seeing. I mean, what's so interesting about this is what's happening in the UK right now. Mm-hmm. So, the UK has got inflation comparable to ours, maybe even a little bit higher. It's all driven by loose monetary policy to monetize the debts from the COVID bailouts and hyperspending. Mm-hmm. And this new prime minister who fashions herself after Margaret Thatcher, so she says, announces, we're going to cut taxes, which in principle sounds great because government shouldn't have our money. It's terrible at spending it. But the problem is, as Milton Friedman said in the 80s, don't look at the taxes, look at the spending. And so now it's become clear that, so you've seen the pound has fallen and the bond markets are going crazy. And so even though inflation is high, the English central bank, the Bank of England, is like going in and trying to bail out bond markets with printing more money, because investors are like, well, where are you going to get the money that's lost from the tax cut? Like, how's that going to work? Because we're in a lot of debt, and you're not saying you're going to cut any spending. And so everybody knows that you can't just get out of this scot-free. There's the piper has to be paid. I think the US, we can keep the game going longer because we still have the world's reserve currency and we're the tallest pygmy. You know, look at the dollar. The dollar's gone up in the face of all this stuff. We've got 9% inflation, and the dollar is like the strongest international currency. We're the tallest pygmy. We're the least worst.
Yeah, it's like Peter Schiff says, we're the cleanest shirt in a dirty laundry bin.
Right. So we can kind of keep the game going a little longer and sort of borrow from other people who we will ultimately screw over, just like the U.S. government did in 1971 when Nixon said, go pound sand. I'm not going to make good on your debts. I mean, that was like a default, but that is somehow not referred to as a default. That's going to happen again. There'll be an international default at some point, and then they'll default on the so-called entitlements, which are legally not entitled to at all. So they'll have to. That's where all the money is. That's where all the spending is. It's all Medicare and Medicaid.
Yeah.
Well,
okay, they're going to cut. All right.
I don't see how they get out of it. At some point.
Yes, some point.
Well,
yes.
I guess they could get out of it by just printing more debt, which is inflationary, to pay it off as time goes on. It still all comes out of the general fund. So at least
that will just be delaying the disaster, Tim.
I don't think I think the politics of inflation are pretty clear. People don't like it.
Yeah.
People don't like,
well,
I got a 5% raise, but my grocery bill went up 20%. So I didn't get a raise.
Yeah.
Oh.
Well, you're right. I mean, when they go to the grocery store to buy the groceries, but when they get their check from the government for $1,300 for COVID, they don't mind it then. They don't see the inflation coming around the corner. Yeah. So, and the government is the driver of this spending, and they love inflation. They love spending with debt or any other way they can spend it, either paying it with debt or paying it with taxes. So, if you're either going to cut spending, then which is a deflationary act because you don't require as much debt to fund the lack of spending, so it stays in the economy. And so I don't know. I don't think they're going to do a deflationary thing. I think they're going to do an inflationary reaction to the pickle they've become getting themselves into. But we'll find out who's right, John or Tim.
Well, just as our shepherds are kind of leading us to the abyss in the end, unfortunately our show is getting pretty close to the end as well. And let me just end it off with our Knucklehead Noise Patrol, where we can talk about how our illustrious great shepherd Biden is guiding us through this economic mess. And maybe we could pull up a visual here, Leon. So on September 13th, Biden hosted a White House party where he was celebrating his Inflation Reduction Act, because clearly that's how you beat inflation, is by making an edict against it and spending more money. But apparently what he said during that, he said, "Today offers proof that the soul of America is vibrant, the future of America is bright, and the promise of America is real." And as he was saying that, you could watch the market plummet behind him. He was saying that. And apparently some of his buddies in the media were also covering for him on that too, trying to say what a great day it was as the market.
How shocking to know that the media was covering for Biden, as he told us that the oceans will stop rising and the trees will grow greener and the skies will be bluer and everything is going to be so wonderful because he got this Inflation Reduction Act passed, which is nothing but a bunch of spending and a bunch of garbage in the process. God help us with these people, Lord.
You forgot the kitties purr louder and the puppies' tails wag faster.
My apologies,
Also.
Tim.
Forgot about that. You got to leave that in there too. Yeah. Well, I love how they always name these acts the exact opposite of what they are. That we had the Patriot Act, we had the Freedom Act, we had the Affordable Care Act, and all these acts named completely the exact opposite, which is how they always name them. So the Inflation Reduction Act is therefore aptly named.
Yeah, it is among the most brazen. It's like, what does this bill have to do with inflation? Like literally nothing. There's nothing about monetary policy in this bill.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant.
Yeah,
We should call it
you'd
the
expect-
puppies and puppies are cute act.
Yeah. How about stop creating so much currency and credit in the monetary system? How about that, maybe?
Yes.
Well, I think we just about reached the end of our show, and I just want to give a second to our guest, John, to tell us any last messages you wanted to leave our audience with, or anything about your website or show. Liam, maybe you could pull that up real quick again, just so people can see the URL.
Great. Yeah. Well, it's Dad Saves America. The best place to go is our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Dad Saves America. And we are celebrating fatherhood, healthy masculinity, and helping dads, parents, future dads, anybody that cares about the country to reimagine education, get involved and engaged in their kids' lives, and understand the topics the way they are should be properly understood. Because how are we going to have a free society if we don't have a generation that wants freedom, that understands freedom, and is prepared to flourish in freedom?
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, John, and thank all of you out there for joining us as well. And until the next time, stay free.
Yes, indeed.
Thank you.
Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, always and forever.
Thank you for listening to the Knuckleheads of Liberty podcast. Find us on Facebook, Rumble, YouTube, your favorite podcast network, and at knuckleheadsofliberty.com.